Hey guys, welcome back to Down and Dirty Modding. This is our fourth video in the cable sleeving series. As you can see, we've got our cable sleeved and in the case. If you've got a really sharp eye, you'll notice I used paracord instead of the PET I was going to use. Now, I want to say a few things about that because I've used Electroduct in the past and I had no problems with their sleeve and it was competitively priced. But the small batches that you're going to get off Amazon that are like individually packaged, like 25 feet, are a horrible deal. Don't want to dig on them, but they're overpriced, and with it coming, it came flattened out, so it made it almost impossible to use. So I'd stay away from those. But like I said, the larger spools and the by the foot stuff, I'm thinking are okay. So, but it was kind of fortunate. I had some 550 laying around, and that gives me a chance to kind of show you sleeving with paracord. It's not too different from PET, but it's got its own little tricks. So I'm going to cover those, and also I had to do some splices. A few people were hounding me to get the video out for Splices because they're waiting on me. But you know who you are. You do. But so I'm going to cover Splices, and I'm going to cover what you're going to need to do them, and how to do them, and how to sleeve those splices once you're done. So rather than listen to me ramble on for a while, let's go ahead and get into it. Alright guys, you can see we've got all our stuff kind of set up to do some sleeving. All our pinouts are here, all our measurements are out. And what we're going to do is take some of this gray paracord, this is 550, and we're going to go ahead and sleeve it through some black wire. So let's go ahead and get us a piece of wire cut. I'm going to make this one kind of short. So we're going to cut wire, get one side stripped off, and a terminal on it. And you know, my rules just kind of went out the window with trying to make sure that it all goes the same direction. This thing's got so many kinks in it that it's kind of pointless to even try. So we'll just make it work. I've got it crimped on, and with paracord, the biggest problem comes in with the fact that there's braiding in it, and how are you supposed to sleeve with all this braiding in? And what I do to get past that is I'll measure out a little bit. You notice I'm not pulling this paracord tight. I'm just kind of holding it the right length, and I'm going to add a couple of inches onto that, and I'm going to cut that piece off, and we're going to use this piece to sleeve now because we can take that cording and go ahead and yank it out. Some funny paracord, it likes to pull back in on itself. So now we've got our sleeve, it's all ready to go. We are wasting a little bit here and there, but you know, in the long run, it won't be too big of a deal, I don't think. I say that, and the last one, the ones I just finished, I actually ran out of sleeving. So yeah, I say that, but I don't really know if that's correct all the time. So we're going to go ahead and sleeve this up. And like I say, for the most part, paracord is going to be the same as PET. You do the same thing. You melt the end to keep it from fraying. You sleeve it on there. We're going to melt this end down and squeeze it down. Now it will take a little more heat with the 550. The 325 is not as bad, but 550's got a lot more material in it, so you're going to have to get it a little hotter. Pinch that bad boy down. Like I say, you're going to burn the crap out of yourself doing this. My fingers are about numb right now from doing that last set. Take that stuff off. It would just happen to be a pain this time. Okay, so we've got her sleeved up, and this is kind of where it's different. Now, the PET, and actually to a point too, the larger braided sleeving as well, it stretches, but then it always wants to go back to its normal state where it's kind of happy. So when you're trying to get your distance out and get all the slack out, you don't want to pull this stuff real tight. You're going to end up adding length onto it, and when you cut this off, it's going to shrink back a whole lot. And then you're going to have to really stretch it to get it over your other terminal. And then it's always going to have some tension on it, and I don't really like that on mine. Other people may do that, but I'd rather this be a little bit loose and happy rather than always pulling on my little melted part all the time. So I just kind of get the slack out of it and not pull on it real tight, and then I'm going to cut that right at the end. Now if you're doing 325 paracord, you actually want to add, instead of cutting that right off at the end of your wire like we just did, you're going to want to add like 1/8 of an inch. You want to cut it a little past the wire. The 325, where it varies with the or differs from the larger paracord, is it's already tight on that wire whenever it's sleeved on it. So there isn't any extra give or anything to it. You've pretty much got it stretched out. And since you don't have the extra give that this stuff has, once you put a terminal on here, you actually need a little bit of extra to make up for the width, the diameter of that terminal. I went into it not even thinking about that, and sleeved a few wires and noticed I was always coming up short on my distance when it should be pretty much right at the end of the wire. And that's what I came up with. That terminal just adds enough to stretch it out that it shortens the wire up, or shortens the sleeve up, and you wind up short. So I started giving it about 1/8 inch past the end of the wire, and everything started working out great. And you'll see that this, I didn't really stretch it out or anything, but when I cut it off, it backs off about 1/2 inch. So that's that stretching and pulling back that I'm talking about. So that small amount's not going to be a big deal, but if we were trying to make up that much, it would be horrible. And then also to kind of show the stretching of it, you can get this stuff to fit really tight on the wire, and I just gained about 1 inch of sleeve. So but like I say, that would always be pulling on that end, and I don't think it would ever pull off, but I just don't like it that way, so I don't do it that way. We got that cut. I bored you with specifics of random things that you're probably not going to deal with, so we're going to go ahead and put a terminal on this end. And I don't want to come off as saying, this is how you have to do this. You have to do this every time, and you can only do it my way. This is more of an overall guideline. You're going to find little deals here that while you're sleeving, that this works better for you, or maybe you want to cut that a little long, or you want to cut that a little short, or you want to put a little more tension on it. A lot of this is just kind of a general guide of how to get it to look right, and then you can take it and nudge those ways of doing things around a little bit to suit your needs and suit the way you like to sleeve. So don't think everything I'm saying is written in stone, because it's definitely not. I've taken what I've digested for information and changed it up to work for me, and that's kind of what I want you all to do. Take this, use this as a stepping stool to kind of develop your own style, your own method. I'm going to go ahead and throw that terminal on, and then we can pull our PET up to the end. Go ahead and melt that. And actually, a big step that I forgot to put in there was burning off that end to keep it from fraying. Luckily, this stuff is a pretty tight weave, so it doesn't actually fray too bad. But ow, man, that's hot. All right, there you go, 550 sleeved. So now I guess we'll talk about splices. Put that to the side. Now what you're going to need for splicing is all your normal sleeving stuff, and obviously sleeving wire. But we're also going to throw in a regular set of wire cutters if you don't use them already. What I want to do with the stripping the wires, you can't do with these cutters. So you need a regular pair of wire strippers, an X-Acto knife, a Sharpie, or a paint pen. It doesn't actually have to be a Sharpie brand, obviously. Any good marker. We're going to use some extra heat shrink, not our little small pieces. Super glue. Wow, I just melted my solder. Nice. Soldering iron, solder. Try not to set that next to your soldering iron while it's heating up, or you will melt it. I also use, I guess it's like the helping hands. It's a little X-Acto deal that holds the wire. That's not necessary, but If you've got one, boy, they're handy. So let's go ahead and get some wire cut so we can start our splicing. So what you want to do with this is, let me go ahead and cut a wire that would go in the case. We're going to call this a motherboard wire. And in our motherboard, we've got 4 spots that I've written down that have dual ends on them. Now what you've got to take into consideration is, man, this wire is really jacked, is where you want that splicing in your system. You know, if we were to hold this kind of in the system right now, we'd come out of the power supply, go back to the grommet, up, do another grommet, into the board. Well, you don't want your splice on the back side of the motherboard tray, because that's going to add some width to it. And if you do anything in the back, or you want to dress up the back, you're going to have this nice big splice in the middle of it. So we don't really want it there. We obviously don't want it next to our connector on the 24 pin, because we don't want to see it through the front of the side of the case. So for us, it's going to be best to put it down by the power supply, since we're going to have a cover over that anyway. So we're going to keep it relatively close to the end, where it's going to go into the power supply. So I'm thinking about that far away. Now what I'm going to do is mark that out and cut me a wire that length. So, and I've actually already done that. So, but I haven't cut a wire that length, so I got to do that. So, and actually I didn't really think about it, but I was using red wire when I was using a Sharpie to mark this stuff, and black really doesn't show up on black. So let me grab a paint pen. I just keep a cheapie around, because every now and then you have to touch up something, Silver. So we're going to take our paint pen, and we're going to hold our wires up to each other and even out the ends. And then what we're going to want to do is mark the ends of these, and that curve really just doesn't help anyone, but we're going to say those are evened up, and we want to mark about a 1/2 inch of this end on the short wire, and also that same space on the long wire. So if you can see, I marked off a spot that, in my painting skills, I'm a little off, but we've marked about a 1/2 inch out and a corresponding 1/2 inch on the other one when the ends are lined up. And what we're going to do with that is not let the paint dry, because that would be smart. We're going to get paint all over ourselves while we strip off our painted strip. Just that bit that we painted on. And what we basically done with that was lined up where our open wire is going to be. So we stripped off that end, and we're going to take our wire strippers, and we're not going to strip any of this. Basically, we're going to use them to cut at the ends of this paint, or the end of this mark. So you just stick it in there, snip down on it. You can turn that and roll it, give it like a 90-degree turn to make sure you get a better cut all the way around, because these always tend to leave a little bit of a gap that doesn't cut. So we're going to do that to both ends of this mark. And then you're going to take an X-Acto knife, and we're going to cut that little section out. So you want to be really careful. You don't have to use a whole lot to get through the insulation, and you don't really want to cut any wires. So be kind of gentle, just cut through the insulation, and then you can kind of bend one of the corners back, maybe, and peel off this bit of insulation like that. So now we've got a bare piece of wire right in the middle. Throw that insulation away somewhere. And with this little strip right there, we're going to take our X-Acto knife again and put it through the center of that wire strand, and work it through there, and then twist it 90 degrees. So we're going to produce, it's going to produce a little diamond for us. And that's what we're going to stick the other wire through, and that'll hold it. And basically that's just how I learned how to splice without cutting all these wires apart and having stuff fall apart. This makes it a whole lot easier, I think, and keeps the wire solid on this long run. So we'll take our short wire, kind of give that a bit of a kink so it stays in that diamond. Feed it right through, and then we want to line up our ends. And once they're lined up, we can come down here and we kind of wrap this wire around, closing our diamond up and spiraling that wire around our longer wire, and that way it holds. Now we're ready to solder that joint together, which will take our holding hands, or helping hands. Actually, I don't think that's what it's called, because I know it's like an X-Acto brand, this one, so they probably have some other stupid name for it. I'm not. They're X-Acto hands. Who knows? What have I done with mine? There's solder. Usually when I do solder, I cut a little piece off and use that, but since I'm only doing a little bit, and my soldering technique's horrible, so bear with me. And from the school of just pour a bunch of solder onto it and hope it takes. Definitely a form follows function kind of person. So that's all soldered up. And we've got a spliced wire set. So this is all fine and dandy, but now we need to sleeve it. Otherwise it'd look really horrible and short out on anything it ran past. So for the sleeving part of it, we're going to get a couple sections of this gray kind of eyeballed close. And I want to leave extra because I'm going to be able to, I'll have to cut some off the ends. But I still got to get that braiding out of there, so kind of gets excessive with that. I'll cut two little sections for my short pieces, and then I'm going to take the long piece. I'm going to gauge from up here a little bit over our solder joint. And again, I'm not pulling that tight or anything. And I'm going to give it a couple extra inches just in case. And then we pull all our braiding out, or all our cable, yeah, cabling, whatever. Toss all that. My cat's probably dying over in the corner thinking, what are you throwing all the string away for? I could be playing with that. It's free. This is super nice paracord, but man, the strands are just hard to pull out of it. So now we can melt our ends to keep them from fraying. And a lot of this is going to be very similar to the other regular strands, except that it's not connected. Basically what we're going to do is slide these short ones down these short ends. And then we're going to take some super glue and apply a little bit of super glue. And I think, I haven't like ran any scientific tests or anything, but I think you're better off applying it to the insulation, especially with these, because these won't go past the insulation on the short pieces. So if you put a little bit of dab on the insulation right at the end of that. How do they keep the top from gluing itself on? That's the question. We put a little dab right there. Push our sleeve down and glue myself to the wire every time to try to get that to take. I'm going to do the same thing with the other side, the other short piece. I'll slide that down and put a dab of super glue down here. And what that's going to do is going to kind of hold it when we're pulling and tugging on it, and it's going to give it an anchor on this side, so since it's not connected all the way across. So if you're ever pulling these pins back out, or happen to be pulling on that wire from this end, there's a little bit of something extra holding it there, so you're not yanking it out of this splice. And we're just going to cut these off at the ends of the wire. And melt those a little bit to keep them from fraying. And then we're going to put in our longer side. And it's basically the same thing. We're going to sleeve it up and super glue it. Now this one, I think, like I say, I didn't really scientifically test this, but every time I try to glue it to the metal, it doesn't glue to the metal. So make sure you dab that super glue on that sleeve or on that insulation. Otherwise you're just going to be gluing your fingers to stuff for a while. We're going to slide it up, and we're going to slide it up all the way over that solder joint too. It's going to give us a little bit extra insulation, because I mean really that's what sleeves for, is insulation. And then we're going to put some heat shrink over the top of that too, and that way we'll have a nice good joint. So we're going to not pull real hard, but we're going to cut this, get all the slack out, cut this end off, and then heat that up so the frays don't come and visit. Now with our heat shrink, what I do is cut about 1.5 inch piece of it, or 1.5 inch pieces, and you just want to slide that up and slide it up your single end, because you're going to fight going the other direction. I did kind of try that once a little bit, and it doesn't go anywhere. And when you get up here to this joint, you'll probably, unless you've got big enough heat shrink, you'll probably have to try to twist it and get it to roll over all of it. This actually went together really easy, because it's not gonna, you know, a lot of times that extra pair of or extra wire makes it difficult to slip that heat shrink over. It gets real tight. So I'm going to push it up to where I can feel my solder joint about halfway in the middle, and then we're going to go ahead and just use a lighter to knock this heat shrink down. Normally I use a heat gun, but this does work. It just gets the heat shrink a little sooty. Alright, there you go. You sleeved a splice. So guys, that's cable sleeving. As you can see, it looks nice in your case. It really dresses it up, and it's really not that hard to do. Now if you want to get down to the nuts and bolts of it, what we're really trying to cover in dirty modding, the time and cost of the mod. Well, time wise, I think it took me about 4 hours, including all the recording, to actually sleeve this set of cables, which isn't bad. I think a novice should easily be able to do it in a weekend. So, and that's kind of my aim, is something you can do over a weekend and be done when Monday rolls around. And cost wise, what you probably should have asked before you started watching me for like an hour or so mumble about cables. I know that you can get braided cables online for about $110 for this power supply. Now, if you go out and start fresh and buy tools, sleeve, wire, all your terminals and all your connectors, and with tools I'm covering mainly the big ticket ones, crimpers, wire cutters, stripper. I didn't think about soldering irons, but they're not too expensive, 10-15 bucks. But if you get like the more specific, that's a word I hate, specific tools for cable sleeving, the ones that really don't work for anything else but cable sleeving, if you buy all that stuff, you're going to have about $113 wrapped in it, $115. So we're really right on par with what you can actually buy a set for. You're just going to have to invest your time. The nice thing about it though is if you buy the tools the first time, the second time the price goes down to like $60 a set. And that would get you all the wires in here plus like 3 SATAs and 3 Molex. So it's really not a bad deal. It really fits into our modding on a budget kind of idea. So that's it. That's cable sleeving. Oh, I just wanted to mention one thing and call myself out. I wasn't being really flashy and cool by using the gray. I think it looks great, but I actually violated my own cardinal rule of having enough material. So luckily I had some gray paracord laying around that I could flip in there and give me some stripes. But you know, it's one of those mistakes where now that I see it, I really like it, and I might think about changing the color of this case to gray and using that as my color scheme. So that's it for cable sleeving, guys. I guess hang around next time. We should be looking at lighting, I do believe. We're going to start with some LED tricks and maybe some EL wire, and how to introduce different ways and how to introduce lighting to your case in different ways. So if you've got any questions about what I've done or what I missed, or if I glossed over something, or you've got another mod that you want to see, or you've got a name for this bad boy, leave them down in the comments and I'll make sure to get back to them as quick as I can. And until next time, I guess, keep on modding your cases, guys.